Children are not props, and they should never be treated as tools for attention, sympathy, or validation. When a parent begins to exaggerate or even create illness in a child, the line is not just crossed, it's shattered. This behavior, often categorized as Munchausen by proxy, is not about misguided love or overprotectiveness. It's a deliberate manipulation of truth and trust, where the child becomes a stage and the illness becomes a script, written to satisfy the parent's emotional or psychological needs. The child, instead of being protected, becomes a pawn in a disturbing play for pity. This condition is not about confusion or lack of awareness, it is about control. The parent orchestrates a scenario where they are seen as the devoted, self-sacrificing caregiver, while the child is reduced to a character in a carefully constructed drama. Doctors, teachers, friends, and even social media audiences are pulled into this web, often unknowingly reinforcing the deception by offering praise and support. Meanwhile, the child has no choice but to submit to the story being written for them, often with very real and very harmful consequences. Children subjected to this manipulation begin to believe the lies they're told. When you're told day after day that you are sick, that you need pills, treatments, doctors, you begin to doubt your own body and mind. You lose your sense of self and develop a learned helplessness that can take years, sometimes a lifetime, to unlearn. What seems like care becomes a prison, and when that trust between parent and child is broken, it becomes almost impossible to repair. The medical trauma inflicted on these children is staggering. Many endure unnecessary procedures, medications, and hospitalizations, not because they are ill, but because someone needs them to be. The damage is not just physical, it's emotional and psychological. These children grow up fearing the very systems meant to keep them safe. They often suffer from anxiety, PTSD, and an inability to trust authority figures or their own instincts. What's done under the guise of love leaves scars far deeper than most people can imagine. It doesn't end with the child. Entire families are affected. Siblings may feel neglected. Relationships within the home deteriorate, and extended family members often find themselves caught in the crossfire of lies and guilt. The manipulation can extend to schools, hospitals, online communities, and even fundraising platforms where sympathy becomes currency. The ripple effects of one parent's deceit can stretch far and wide, leaving confusion and pain in its wake. One of the most dangerous aspects of this condition is the way it is rewarded by the digital world. A parent documenting their child's supposed illness online can receive an outpouring of support, admiration, and sometimes money. The child's suffering becomes a performance, amplified and rewarded with likes and shares. But behind every viral post is a child who might be hurting, confused, or silenced. The internet can turn a private lie into a public illusion, making it harder to detect and even harder to stop. This behavior must be confronted with truth and urgency. It is not cruel to hold a parent accountable when a child is being harmed. It is necessary. Protection should never be optional, and silence is not neutrality. If a child is being manipulated or hurt, someone has to speak up. Healing can only begin when the lies stop, and for that child to reclaim their identity, their health, and their trust in the world, someone must first choose to believe them. Munchausen by proxy is not confusion. It is not a case of a parent simply not understanding what's best for their child. It's not a well-meaning mistake or an overprotective instinct gone too far. It is a deeply controlling and calculated behavior, driven by a need to be seen, to be praised, and to be validated by others. The parent doesn't just want to help their child, they want others to see them helping, to recognize them as a hero. In doing so, they create a false reality where they are the center of attention and admiration, and the child becomes the means to achieve that. The control goes far beyond medical appointments and exaggerated symptoms. It extends into every part of life. The parent dictates what the child can say, how they should feel, and even how they should look. If the child resists or shows signs of independence, they are met with guilt, manipulation, or even punishment. The parent controls the narrative so tightly that the child often loses their own voice. They begin to question their reality, unsure of what is true and what has been planted in their mind. This manipulation is often disguised as love. From the outside, it can look like devotion, a mother constantly at her child's bedside, a caregiver fiercely advocating for their child's needs. But under that surface lies a toxic dynamic where the child's identity is slowly erased. The control is so complete that the child no longer knows if they are truly sick or simply being told that they are. This confusion is exactly what the parent wants. As long as the child is uncertain and dependent, the parent remains in control. The behavior is often meticulously planned. The parent researches illnesses, fabricates symptoms, and even tampers with medications or records to support their lies. They may lie to doctors, switch hospitals to avoid suspicion, or change schools to keep the truth hidden. The goal isn't just to appear as a good parent, but to maintain the illusion of constant crisis that keeps everyone's attention centered on them. They thrive in the chaos they create, and they manipulate others into becoming allies in their story. Even professionals can be fooled. Doctors, teachers, and social workers may find themselves believing the parent's story, especially when the child is too young or too frightened to speak up. The parent often appears articulate, emotional, and deeply involved in their child's care. It's not uncommon for them to be praised for their dedication. Meanwhile, the child is being controlled behind the scenes, unable to express doubt or fear without being accused of ingratitude or disobedience. Over time, the child becomes trapped in a psychological maze. They are taught to distrust their own feelings and rely solely on the parent's version of reality. Any attempt to escape that control can be met with emotional backlash, threats, or further manipulation. The child may be made to feel guilty for wanting freedom or for expressing pain. This creates a cycle where the child learns to stay silent, to play along, and to accept the identity that has been forced upon them. Breaking free from this kind of control requires a support system that sees beyond the surface. It requires professionals, friends, and family members willing to question what they are told and to listen carefully to the child's voice. Most importantly, it requires the courage to confront the truth that this is not love, not care, and not confusion. It is control, and it must be stopped before it consumes another life. The child learns to believe the lie slowly, over time, and often without realizing it. At first, there may be confusion. They might feel fine physically, but are told they are unwell. They may be taken to doctors, given medication, or kept home from school for reasons they don't understand. Because they trust their parent and have no reason to doubt them, they accept the version of reality that is presented to them. After all, children are conditioned to believe that their caregivers act in their best interests. When that trust is used as a tool of manipulation, it becomes almost impossible for the child to distinguish between truth and fabrication. Eventually, the child internalizes the false identity that has been created for them. They begin to think of themselves as fragile, chronically ill, or dependent on medication and adult supervision. Their self-worth becomes intertwined with their condition. They may even come to see illness as a source of attention or connection, reinforcing the cycle. When they are treated as helpless or weak, they may find comfort in the familiarity of that role, especially if it brings them affection or care they otherwise wouldn't receive. The lie becomes a part of who they are. This belief system affects how the child interacts with the world. They may withdraw from social activities or struggle in school due to prolonged absences or anxiety. They could begin to fear independence, worrying that without their parents' help they would not survive. This fosters an unhealthy dependence that can follow them well into adulthood. When you grow up believing that something is wrong with you, it can shape every relationship, every opportunity, and every choice you make. The consequences are not just temporary, they are deep and long lasting. The psychological toll is immense. These children often suffer from anxiety, depression, and low self-esteem. They might feel like burdens, always in need of help, always at risk. Some may even develop psychosomatic symptoms, physically manifesting the illnesses they were told they had. The brain begins to respond to years of conditioning, producing real pain, fatigue, or discomfort. It becomes a vicious cycle where the body responds to the belief that it is broken, even if there was nothing wrong to begin with. Over time, the child may begin to question things, especially if they encounter safe adults who challenge the narrative. But this process is not easy. Doubting their parent means doubting the very foundation of their life. It creates a painful internal conflict, wanting to break free, but fearing what that would mean. It takes tremendous courage to question something that has been presented as care and love. Often, the child will need validation from professionals or trusted adults to start reclaiming their sense of reality. Even when the deception is exposed, the recovery is not immediate. The child must unlearn years of falsehoods and rebuild their identity from the ground up. They must learn to trust their own body, their own mind, and their own choices. Therapy is often necessary to address the trauma and confusion left behind. Healing requires space, support, and patience. It involves acknowledging the pain, but also rediscovering the strength that was buried beneath the lie. Most heartbreaking of all is that this entire process started with someone they trusted the most. The betrayal of a parent is a unique kind of wound. It cuts deeper than any physical harm. Yet despite the damage, many survivors of this experience go on to reclaim their voice, their health, and their freedom. But that journey begins with truth that the lie was never theirs to carry, and that they deserve a life defined by who they are, not by what they were told to be. Medical trauma is real, and it leaves a mark that is often invisible but deeply ingrained. For children who are subjected to unnecessary treatments, repeated hospital visits, and invasive procedures, the effects go beyond the physical pain. Each test, each injection, and each hospital stay becomes a source of fear and confusion. These children may not understand why they are being poked, prodded, or sedated, but they are told it is for their own good. When those treatments are not medically necessary, the trust between child and caregiver becomes severely damaged. Over time, this kind of repeated medical interference begins to create anxiety around doctors, clinics, and even the idea of being sick. These children may start to associate medical environments with punishment or suffering. Instead of seeing a doctor as someone who heals, they begin to see them as someone who causes pain or invades their body. The trauma becomes layered, first from the procedure itself, and then from the realization that it may have been unnecessary or avoidable. This fear can persist into adulthood. A person who was subjected to medical abuse as a child might avoid health care entirely later in life. They may ignore symptoms, resist checkups, or experience panic attacks in clinical settings. The very system designed to provide care becomes a trigger for distress. In some cases, they may even develop post-traumatic stress disorder, reliving medical trauma through flashbacks, nightmares, or heightened anxiety when discussing health. Medical trauma also fractures a person's relationship with their own body. When a child is told that their body is constantly failing or needing intervention, they begin to see themselves as defective. They may feel shame or guilt over being sick, even when the illness was fabricated. This distorted self-image can have lifelong consequences. It can interfere with self-confidence, body autonomy, and emotional development, leaving the individual feeling powerless and broken. In families where this behavior is present, children are often isolated from others who could help. They are taken out of school, restricted from activities, and kept closely monitored under the guise of protection. This isolation not only deepens their dependence on the abusive caregiver, but also prevents outside adults from noticing warning signs. The medical trauma becomes a private experience, hidden from the world, and the child's cries for help are often mistaken for symptoms rather than signals of distress. There are also serious consequences when these children are finally believed and removed from the abusive situation. While it is a necessary and positive step, it does not erase the years of trauma endured. These children often struggle with intense emotions, betrayal, confusion, grief, and anger. They must learn to differentiate between real illness and false narratives. They need ongoing therapy and a support system willing to help them untangle the lies they were told about their bodies and their health. Healing from medical trauma is not simple, but it is possible. It begins with safety, truth, and compassionate care from professionals who understand the unique psychological scars this experience creates. Survivors of this kind of abuse must be taught to trust their instincts again, to feel ownership over their bodies, and to believe that they are worthy of care that is respectful, honest, and real. Only then can they begin to reclaim the life that was taken from them in the name of false medicine. The ripple effects are deep. The ripple effects are deep and often stretch far beyond what most people can immediately see. When a parent engages in deceptive behavior like Munchausen by proxy, the damage doesn't stop with the child. It spreads through the entire family, affecting relationships, emotional stability, and trust on every level. What seems like a private struggle between a mother and child becomes a toxic wave that touches siblings, partners, grandparents, and even close friends who may be drawn into the web of manipulation and lies. Siblings of the targeted child often suffer in silence. They might feel neglected because so much attention is placed on the supposedly sick child. They may start to act out or withdraw, feeling like they must compete for the same kind of concern or recognition. Some siblings grow up angry and confused, resenting the chaos and instability that define their home. In families where love and attention are doled out based on illness or vulnerability, children quickly learn that being healthy might mean being invisible. Marriages and partnerships within the home are also strained to the breaking point. The parent who fabricates or exaggerates the child's illness usually maintains tight control over information, decisions, and narratives. If the other parent questions the behavior, it often leads to intense conflict, denial, or manipulation. Over time, trust between the adults erodes, communication breaks down, and the family unit begins to splinter under the weight of suspicion and secrecy. In many cases, one partner may even leave, unable to continue in an environment they no longer understand or support. Extended family members often find themselves caught in the middle. They may notice inconsistencies in the child's condition, or they may have doubts about the parent's stories, but they feel uncertain about how to approach it. Some may be manipulated into supporting the false narrative, donating money, offering help, or expressing constant concern without realizing they're being used. Others might become estranged when they express concern and are met with defensiveness or outrage. The result is division and mistrust that can last for years. The deception also seeps into schools, medical offices, and entire communities. Teachers may be asked to make special accommodations based on exaggerated health claims. Doctors and nurses might spend valuable time and resources trying to diagnose and treat symptoms that are fabricated or induced. Communities that come together in compassion may later feel betrayed when the truth emerges. The damage to those relationships can lead to cynicism and a lack of trust in future cases that are legitimate. In the digital age, the ripple effects are magnified by social media. A parent can easily share updates, photos, and emotional stories online to attract sympathy and attention. Strangers become emotionally invested, and online communities offer validation and praise that fuel the behavior even more. The child, meanwhile, has no say in how their image and story are used. They may later grow up to find their entire childhood documented online in ways that are distorted, humiliating, or simply untrue, creating a whole new layer of trauma. These ripple effects are not accidental. They are often a byproduct of intentional choices repeated over time. They leave scars not only on the child, but on everyone who tried to love, support, or believe in the family. Healing from such widespread harm takes more than just rescuing the victim. It requires rebuilding trust across every layer of relationship that was damaged. It demands honesty, accountability, and support for all those who were caught in the wake of a parent's deception. The internet fuels the fantasy in ways that were never possible before. A parent who engages in behavior like Munchausen by proxy can now find instant validation, attention, and sympathy with just a few clicks. Social media platforms offer a stage where a carefully crafted narrative can reach thousands, sometimes millions, of viewers. A photo of a child in a hospital bed, paired with a tearful caption, draws immediate emotional reactions. People comment with support, send messages of encouragement, and often share the story with others, all without knowing if any of it is true. This digital validation becomes addictive. Every like, share, and comment reinforces the parent's behavior, rewarding them for continuing the deception. The online audience becomes part of the fantasy, unknowingly participating in the manipulation. The more dramatic or heartbreaking the story, the greater the response. Some parents begin to escalate the lies, inventing new illnesses or crises to maintain interest and engagement. What started as a small exaggeration can spiral into an elaborate, ongoing hoax. Meanwhile, the child becomes a character in someone else's online drama. They are photographed, filmed, and written about without their consent or understanding. Their medical experiences, real or fabricated, are broadcast to strangers. As they grow older, many of these children struggle with the invasion of privacy, humiliation, and confusion about their identity. They may discover that their entire childhood has been curated and shared, not as a reflection of who they are, but as a means of garnering attention for someone else. Online fundraising platforms can also become part of the deception. Some parents exploit public sympathy to collect money for medical expenses that may not even exist. Donations pour in from kind-hearted strangers who believe they are helping a sick child. These platforms often lack the ability to fully verify stories, allowing fraudulent campaigns to thrive. When the truth comes out, it not only harms the child, but erodes public trust in legitimate causes and families truly in need. The internet also allows the parent to find communities that reinforce their narrative. They may join support groups where they are praised for their strength, share updates that dramatize their child's condition, or connect with others who have similar motivations. In these echo chambers, harmful behavior is normalized or even celebrated. This further isolates the child and reduces the chances that someone will see through the lies and intervene. Attempts to question the narrative are often met with hostility. People who express doubt may be attacked, blocked, or accused of lacking compassion. The parent's online persona becomes so carefully constructed that any challenge to it is seen as a threat. This defensiveness can make it even harder for doctors, teachers, or family members to speak up when they suspect something is wrong. The internet becomes both a shield and a weapon, used to protect the lie and silence the truth. For the child, the internet becomes a permanent archive of their manipulation. Even after the deception is uncovered, those photos and stories remain. They may be reposted, rediscovered, or referenced long after the damage has been done. Healing means not only rebuilding a sense of self, but also confronting a digital trail that may never fully disappear. The internet, in these cases, does not just amplify the harm, it preserves it. making the process of recovery more complex and more painful. We must believe the children. When a child gathers the courage to speak up about something that feels wrong, especially when it involves someone they love and depend on, it is a moment of extraordinary bravery. Children don't have the language or emotional maturity to always explain exactly what's happening, but their discomfort, confusion, or quiet resistance often tells the story. When adults dismiss these signs as exaggeration, fantasy, or rebellion, they allow harm to continue. A child's truth may be fragmented, but it is still truth, and it deserves to be heard with seriousness and compassion. Too often, children are trained to doubt themselves. In environments where manipulation and control are constant, the child learns to suppress their own instinct. They are told that their pain is imagined, that their fears are silly, that their memories are false. This form of psychological conditioning creates a deep internal conflict. Even when the child starts to question the narrative, they are flooded with guilt, shame, and fear. They wonder if they are the ones causing problems. This is why it is so important for the adults around them to look past the surface and truly listen. Believing the child doesn't mean accepting every word without question. It means taking them seriously, giving them a safe space to speak, and involving professionals who can help sort through the facts. It means choosing to protect the vulnerable rather than preserve appearances. It means looking at patterns, watching behavior, and recognizing that a child may speak in actions or emotions long before they have the words to explain what they're going through. Listening is not just hearing. It's watching, noticing, and responding with care. When a child's voice is believed, it opens the door to healing. It lets them know that they are not alone, that their feelings are valid, and that there are people who will fight for their safety and well-being. It begins to undo the lie that they must suffer in silence. Being believed restores a sense of power and agency that abuse has taken from them. It tells them that their life, their body, and their experiences matter. And in that moment, a very broken thing begins to mend. The cost of not believing is too high. Children who are dismissed often retreat further into silence. They may never speak up again, convinced that no one will help. Some begin to doubt reality itself, leading to years of emotional instability, anxiety, and depression. Others may grow up feeling invisible, misunderstood, and abandoned. When society turns its back on children in pain, it allows the cycle of abuse to continue, not just for one child, but for others who may be in the same situation. Belief is the beginning, not the end. Once a child is heard, the work continues. Support systems must be put in place. Therapy, safe environments, and consistent adults who model trust and care are essential. The healing journey is long and complex, but it begins with someone simply saying, "I believe you." That sentence has more power than we often realize. It can be the difference between ongoing harm and the first steps toward freedom. We must create a culture where children are not dismissed, silenced, or ignored when they express fear, confusion, or distress. We must teach parents, educators, and caregivers how to recognize signs of emotional and psychological abuse. Most importantly, we must be willing to act when something feels wrong. Believing the children is not just about words, it is about choices, action, and standing on the side of those who cannot yet fully stand on their own. Accountability is not cruelty. It is often misunderstood as punishment or shame, but in truth, accountability is an essential act of care and justice. When someone is held accountable for their actions, especially in cases of manipulation or abuse, it sends a clear message that those actions are not acceptable and that they have real consequences. This clarity is necessary not just for the person who caused harm, but for the one who was harmed. It affirms the victim's reality and begins to repair the damage that was done by validating their experience. In situations involving children, especially where trust has been broken, accountability becomes even more vital. A child who was manipulated or lied to needs to see that the adults in their life are willing to stand up and name what was wrong. They need to know that their suffering is not invisible and that justice matters. When the adult responsible is protected from consequences, the child receives a dangerous message that truth is less important than protecting reputations, and that their pain is something to be hidden rather than healed. People often confuse accountability with cruelty because it can be uncomfortable to confront the truth, particularly when it involves someone close to us. But real love and care are not about shielding people from discomfort. They are about helping them grow through it. To be held accountable is to be offered a chance to reflect, to change, and to do better. Ignoring harmful behavior or making excuses for it only allows it to continue, often with more devastating effects over time. There is also a broader social responsibility in practicing accountability. Communities, institutions, and systems must be willing to acknowledge when they have failed to protect the vulnerable. Doctors, educators, neighbors, and relatives all play roles in either stopping abuse or allowing it to thrive unnoticed. Accountability means having the courage to admit when we missed signs or failed to act, and then committing to doing better in the future. Without this collective responsibility, cycles of harm repeat themselves across generations. For the person who caused harm, accountability is not the end of their story. It can be the beginning of transformation. When someone is truly confronted with the impact of their actions, and they are supported in making amends, there is potential for deep personal growth. But that transformation cannot begin until the harm is acknowledged. Skipping this step in the name of compassion is not kindness. It is avoidance, and it prolongs suffering for everyone involved. For survivors, accountability often becomes a necessary part of healing. It helps them understand that what happened was not their fault, that they were not imagining the harm, and that they deserved better. It also helps break the internalized shame many survivors carry. When the abuser is held accountable, it shifts the weight of responsibility back to where it belongs. This can be liberating and allows survivors to begin rebuilding their sense of self, trust, and safety. In the end, accountability is not about punishment or revenge. It is about truth, responsibility, and the opportunity to restore what was broken. It is one of the highest forms of respect we can show each other, because it means we believe people can change, we believe victims deserve justice, and we believe that relationships, communities, and lives are worth the effort it takes to heal. Healing starts with truth. When someone has been deeply hurt, especially by a trusted caregiver, the foundation of their world often feels shattered. They begin to question everything, what was real, who they can trust, and even their own memories. This internal chaos can't be resolved with platitudes or distractions. It demands truth. Only by confronting the reality of what happened can a person begin to rebuild. Truth gives shape to the pain and makes sense of the confusion. It becomes the ground upon which real healing can stand. That truth must be spoken clearly and without excuses. Vague admissions or partial confessions only muddy the water and leave the injured person stranded in uncertainty. When the full truth is brought into the light, even if it's painful, it allows for clarity. It validates the experience of the person who was hurt and shows them that their suffering was not imagined. It creates the space for understanding, not only of what happened but also of how it affected every part of their life. Truth also means acknowledging the damage done. It's not enough to say something wrong happened without recognizing the emotional, physical, and psychological toll it took. This acknowledgement helps the survivor know they are not being dramatic or unreasonable. It affirms the reality of their wounds and gives them permission to grieve. Without that space to mourn what was lost, healing gets stuck. Pain ignored or denied never truly goes away, it just buries itself deeper. For many survivors, healing also involves reclaiming their story. When someone else has controlled the narrative, distorted facts, or denied wrongdoing, the survivor loses their voice. Telling the truth from their own perspective helps restore that voice. It empowers them to define what happened, how it affected them, and what they need to move forward. It's not just about justice. It's about restoring ownership of their own life and identity. Truth telling is not always easy. It may trigger shame, guilt, fear, or resistance, especially in families or communities where appearances matter more than honesty. But healing demands courage from both the survivor and those around them. It takes strength to face what's been buried, to sit with the discomfort, and to resist the urge to minimize. Yet this courage is what transforms pain into wisdom and wounds into strength. It is through truth that we break generational cycles and stop history from repeating itself. Once truth is established, other parts of healing can take root. Trust, safety, forgiveness if and when it's possible. These elements cannot exist on false ground. They are fragile and require a foundation that's solid and honest. When someone says, "I see what happened to you and I believe you," that simple truth can change everything. It brings light into darkness and begins to soothe even the deepest injuries. It is not a cure, but it is a beginning. Truth is not just a moment, it is a practice. It must be lived, protected, and returned to when doubt creeps in. Healing will have setbacks, old wounds may reopen, but as long as the truth remains at the center, the process can continue. Step by step, with honesty and support, the person who was hurt begins to find peace. And eventually, they may even find meaning, not in the pain itself, but in the strength they uncovered by facing it. Protecting children is not optional, it is a fundamental duty that should never be up for debate. Children rely entirely on the adults around them for safety, guidance, and care. When those adults fail in that responsibility, whether through neglect, ignorance, or intentional harm, the child pays the price, and that cost can last a lifetime. There is no room for complacency when it comes to the well-being of a child. Turning a blind eye, staying silent, or making excuses only enables the harm to continue. Protection must be proactive, consistent, and unwavering. It starts with recognizing the signs. Children rarely articulate abuse or manipulation in clear terms. They show it through changes in behavior, withdrawal, fear, regression, or sudden health issues that don't align with medical findings. Adults must be vigilant, especially educators, medical professionals, neighbors, and extended family. If something feels wrong, it probably is. The instinct to protect should never be suppressed by fear of conflict or social discomfort. Speaking up may feel uncomfortable, but staying silent allows the damage to grow deeper and more permanent. Protecting children also means questioning narratives that don't add up. A parent who constantly presents their child as sick or suffering without clear medical justification should raise concern. Emotional manipulation, medical abuse, and fabricated illness are real forms of harm. Just because they are harder to detect than physical bruises doesn't mean they are any less dangerous. In fact, the invisible wounds often cut the deepest, affecting the child's sense of self, their trust in others, and their ability to form healthy relationships in the future. There must also be systems in place to respond effectively. Protection isn't just an individual responsibility, it's a collective one. Schools, hospitals, social services, and legal institutions all have roles to play. Policies must be enforced, red flags must be documented, reports must be taken seriously and followed through with care and urgency. A child's safety should never be buried under bureaucracy or delayed by indecision. When the system fails to act, it becomes complicit in the harm, and protection doesn't end once the child is removed from danger. True protection includes support, therapy, and a safe environment where the child can begin to heal. It means surrounding them with people who believe them, who listen without judgment, and who help them rebuild trust in the world. Healing from abuse or manipulation is not quick. It takes time, patience, and consistency, but it is only possible when the child knows they are finally safe and that the adults in their life will stand firmly in their corner. Accountability is also part of protection. When someone harms a child, whether emotionally, psychologically, or physically, they must face consequences, not as an act of revenge, but as a necessary step in affirming that what happened was wrong and will not be tolerated. Protecting children means ensuring that the people who hurt them can't continue the cycle with others. It means taking action that prevents future harm and promotes justice. Children are not resilient by default. They adapt because they have no choice. But true resilience grows in safe, loving environments where their pain is acknowledged, their voices are heard, and their rights are protected. Every child deserves that chance, and it's not a matter of opinion or preference. It is a moral imperative. Protecting children is not optional. It is the most basic, most urgent, and most sacred responsibility we have.